Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service through a unique partnership with Alaska Public Media on this Tuesday, March 22nd, 2022. And if you'd like additional weather information on top of what I provide, you can go to weather.gov. It'll bring up a map of the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii to the lower left. It's a point-and-click map you can interact with. Check out any place in the country if you want to see how the weather's affecting friends and family. Looking at the map this afternoon, I have up there are severe weather watches, tornado watches for portions of Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana. A number of tornado warnings there, as well as winter storm warnings up there across the western upper peninsula of Michigan into the Arrowhead region of Minnesota. And red flag warnings for fire weather there in the southern parts of Texas. But as I said, you can always go here and find all sorts of weather information. Looking at our headlines in Alaska, we have a few winter weather advisories and a winter storm warning that continue for the northern panhandle tonight into early Wednesday morning. Heaviest snow will fall up there in the north end of the panhandle around White Pass, where as much as 1 to 2 feet of snow could fall. Wind chill advisories will continue all along the northwest and eastern Arctic coast, thanks to high pressure way up in the Arctic Ocean. And we've had rather persistent winds out of the north-northeast here. It's caused the back of the pack ice to butt up against the north and east side of St. Paul Island. Don't expect that to move much in the next couple of days. And we're going to start to see a few more Pacific lows that'll cause a more active weather pattern across the Gulf as we go through the end of the week into the weekend. So here are those wind chill advisories in effect for the far north from Point Hope through Utqiagvik all the way east to Katovik. Wind chills could be as cold as 55 below zero overnight into early Wednesday morning. As we go farther south, we do have a couple of winter weather advisories around Haines and Skagway. As much as 6 to 12 inches of snow could fall, especially in the higher elevations. Heaviest snow will fall where the colder air resides there in the higher elevations at the north end around White Pass, where as much as 1 to 2 feet of snow. And then there's also a nuisance kind of flood advisory down just north of Ketchikan for the Ward Recreation area. There's a dam there that releases water after heavy rainfall. It's kind of a seasonal thing there where they're dealing with that, but they don't expect any significant type of flooding with that particular situation. But looking at other parts of the state, let's go to St. Paul. Mostly sunny skies, 25 degrees, but as I mentioned, the pack ice is up against the north and east side of the island, and it's going to be sitting there at least for a little while. And across the northern panhandle, Skagway has overcast skies, snow there. Up in the mountains, rather breezy conditions, winds gusting over 30 miles an hour with a temperature at 42 degrees. And much of the panhandle has seen some wind gusts today in the 35 to near 50 mile an hour range, along with occasional rain showers there through the areas near sea level. So looking at the satellite imagery, you can see kind of the comma curl in the clouds, low pressures over the Gulf. That's helping to pump that moisture up, especially into Haida Gwaii, British Columbia, and also the north end of the Panhandle. Meanwhile, clear skies exist through the Yukon Valley, especially the middle and lower Yukon Valley. And then as we put the map in further motion, you can see those clear skies extend off the southwest coast all the way past St. Paul and Dutch Harbor. And there's the low pressure this afternoon in the central Gulf, a 979 low, arched, occluded front pushing inland into western Canada. That's keeping the unsettled weather and the rain along coastal areas, snow up through the higher elevations there through the coastal mountains. Then clearer skies in the far north, down through the lower half of the Yukon Valley. And as we go through tonight, early on Wednesday morning, that low will just kind of retrograde a bit back toward Kodiak Island. We'll see breezy conditions, maybe some blowing snow even across areas like the Yukon Flats near northwest of Fairbanks. They'll be rather breezy on the south side of the Brooks Range and north of the Yukon River. And by Wednesday afternoon, we see the low that was near Kodiak Island retrograding a little further west and southwestward and weakening, but then the hints of the next low at the bottom of the screen, that low is going to lift northwards up into the lower, say, southwestern quarter of the Gulf on Thursday afternoon with another round of some breezy conditions and rain that'll be spreading northward. So that'll keep active weather going along coastal areas of the Gulf. Further north, we'll still see some breezy conditions at times along the Arctic coast as that high begins to shift toward the Canadian Arctic coast. And overall, I think temperatures will begin to moderate a little bit across the interior as we head here through the end of the week, especially into the weekend. So low temperatures Wednesday morning will generally be above freezing across the Panhandle, below freezing there across south central interior, well below freezing, even a bit below zero there, McGrath. Afternoon highs on Wednesday should get back up above freezing. Talkeetna south through Anchorage along the coast, 40-degree readings at Seward as well as Homer, and along much of the inner and outer channels there of the Panhandle. Lows on Thursday morning will generally still be above freezing there in the Panhandle, a little below freezing, so we have that freeze-thaw cycle, freezing up again at night, icy conditions around Anchorage just as a result of the roads there, the ice redeveloping. And temperatures, though, by Thursday afternoon could be back up around or just above 40 there as far north as Anchorage and down along the Kenai coast, and then out through much of the Panhandle. Expect daytime highs in the low and mid 40s. Across the far north, lows will be well below zero. 20s, even an isolated 30-degree below reading, not out of the question. Not quite as cold, but still sub-zero along the Yukon River. Wednesday afternoon highs, though, will recover into the teens to around 20 degrees along the Yukon River, but still below zero along the Arctic coast. Not quite as cold Thursday morning, but teens to some 20s below there, North Slope and along the Arctic coast, with highs perhaps getting approaching freezing there at Fairbanks and certainly along and south of the Alaska Range. Looking at the southwest Wednesday morning, we do anticipate low temperatures as you get up the upper Kuskokwim, middle Yukon Valley, a bit below zero, otherwise single digits. A bit below freezing there, even through the eastern half of the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula. Mildest temperatures on Wednesday will be toward the Kenai Peninsula and Kodiak, whereas we don't expect highs to get above freezing there across the southwest or along the Alaska Peninsula. And then for Thursday morning, lows still single digits above and a bit below zero there across the southwest interior. Teens, 20s, you don't get near freezing until pretty much you get west of Nikolsky. And then on Thursday afternoon, temperatures will start to rebound a little bit. We could get some readings back up around freezing along the Alaska Range and just the west side of that, 40 again at Kodiak, and then perhaps near freezing down along the Alaska Peninsula and in the mid to upper 30s as you go out along the Aleutians. And checking the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, March 28th through into April 1st to round out the month, it does look like temperatures could average a little above normal through the southwest, including the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, and a little below normal along the southeast Alcan border into the Panhandle. Precipitation will end up being maybe a little above normal, south central back through the southwest portion there of the Panhandle. A little drier than normal, the southern part of the Panhandle, as well as in the far north along the eastern half of the North Slope. But otherwise, we're not anticipating any really big warm-ups or cool down, just kind of a little transition now that we've worked our way into early springtime.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, let's take a look at your aviation weather. If you have a flight planned this midweek, Wednesday into Thursday, the main weather players starting out on Wednesday will be high pressure out over the Arctic Ocean, Beaufort Sea north of the Arctic coast. There will be an area of low pressure just east of Kodiak, a process of kind of weakening, and that'll tend to retrograde a little westward to Shelikof Strait and just south-southwest of Kodiak Island as we go through later Wednesday, early Thursday. Then the next weather maker will be low pressure lifting out of the northern Pacific up into the southwest quadrant of the Gulf here later Thursday and into Friday, and that will deepen a little bit, continue to provide some inclement weather along the Gulf Coast. But weather for Wednesday morning, look for IFR conditions primarily along the Gulf Coast and giving way to MVFR conditions across that region on Wednesday afternoon, southern parts of the state. By Thursday morning, we'll see IFR develop along the Arctic coast, especially from Utqiagvik eastward to Katovik, and then further south, we see IFR conditions that'll be expanding from the lower Gulf and lifting northward, becoming more widespread by Thursday afternoon as that next northern Pacific low begins to emerge into the central and southwest Gulf. As far as pass conditions, Anaktuvik Pass on Wednesday, we'll see VFR conditions, as will Atigun Pass there up through the northern interior. Further south and west, Lake Clark and Merrill will start out Wednesday with VFR conditions, giving way to MVFR conditions as some of that moisture cloud cover presses northward. Rainy Pass may be able to hold on to VFR conditions throughout the day on Wednesday, as will Windy Pass in the central Alaska range. A little further east, Isabel Pass may see VFR conditions early Wednesday, but giving way to MVFR conditions. And Metasta Pass should generally be able to hold on to VFR conditions throughout Wednesday. A little further south and west, Tanita Pass will see VFR conditions become MVFR. And Portage Pass, the western half will be VFR, but the eastern half, including Prince William Sound, will be MVFR on Wednesday. And then finally, in the northern panhandle, Chilkoot and White should generally see MVFR conditions throughout the day on Wednesday. Freezing levels Wednesday morning, we do have the surface freezing line running along the outer panhandle coast, northern Gulf, and then coming back on through the eastern Aleutians up into the central Bering. Otherwise, air masses over Alaska seasonable to a little cooler than what we had going on a few weeks ago. Best potential for some icing will be along the Gulf Coast, especially the early half of the day, from areas of coastal areas of the Kodiak Island, the Kenai Peninsula, eastward to the outer coast there of the Panhandle, from surface to 6,000 feet. And looking at the upper level winds, jet stream level 30,000 feet. Fairly quiet southern parts of the state and over the Panhandle. We do have a weak low circulation there out over the Alaska Peninsula, and then high pressure out over the Chukchi Sea, and we have more of a northeast to east offshore flow across the northwest and Seward Peninsula as high as 85 to 90 knots. Further south then here, as we get down to the mid-levels, 9,000 feet, we see a circulation low pressure south of Kodiak Island onshore. Southerly flow up into the northern coast of the Gulf there with winds of 40 to 50 knots, and then offshore flow easterly flow there across the northern half of the state, Brooks Range along the northwest coast and Seward Peninsula up around 45 knots, and then turning back down out of the northwest there across the eastern Aleutians as high as 50 knots. And then as we bring it down to 3,000 feet, we see the high pressure located there of the Arctic Ocean, Beaufort Sea, north and northeast of the Arctic coast with winds as high as 45 to near 50 knots there along the north slope out of the east-southeast. And then along the Yukon Valley, interior Yukon Valley, we see winds out of the east upwards to 40 knots spreading out there through the Seward Peninsula. And then coming back down across the central eastern Aleutians, 45 to 50 knot winds out of the north-northwest, with a low pressure circulation situated there near Kodiak Island and southerly flow through the heart of the Gulf up into near Prince William Sound, Cordova, as much as 35 knots. And looking at the greatest threat for turbulence will be out over the central interior of the state. There could be some isolated severe turbulence along the Yukon River surface to 4,000 feet, especially south side of the Brooks Range. Also down around the Kenai Peninsula, surface to 4,000 feet, also extending out across much of the central Aleutians and the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, as well as much of the Panhandle interior channels there, surface to 6,000 feet.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and today I'm privileged to introduce Dr. Uccellini, the Director of the United States National Weather Service. Welcome back to Alaska, sir.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Prior to being the leader of the National Weather Service, your work included an extensive look at snowstorms across the northeastern United States. These are the types of storms that can bring some of the country's largest cities to its knees. Tell me a little bit about your fascination with snow.
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always been interested in weather, growing up as a kid on Long Island, New York, and was particularly fascinated by snowstorms, why they occurred. The distribution of snow was very varied across the entire region. The rain-snow line, all those things fascinated me right from the get-go. And I was interested in knowing how they worked, how the forecast worked, or more often than not didn't work one way or the other. And that drove me, that interest continued to build and drove me through high school right into college, wanting to be a meteorologist.
Okay, that's a fascinating story, and I think every meteorologist has a weather story like that in some way.
Right.
Due to Alaska's size and proximity to the North Pole, sometimes it's difficult to detect and analyze the weather patterns over Alaska. What's the National Weather Service doing to improve that weather detection?
Well, observations in this type of environment is a big challenge, whether it's from space or from what we call in situ observations from the ground or within the systems. Clearly, satellites have been playing an increasing role in providing the big picture, not only from a visual sense in what you see is occurring, but also from providing the data for numerical models that then are used to actually predict the weather. Alaska is actually pretty well positioned with respect to polar orbiting satellites, since you get a faster return of those satellites over your particular area. And in fact, the polar satellite system is the backbone for the observations that we use in our models, especially our global models, and they're particularly important for observing weather features that affect Alaska.
Alaskans live and die by the weather every day, and one of the strategic goals of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service is to develop a more weather-ready nation. What does it mean for Alaskans to be weather-ready?
Well, the strategic outcome is based on people being ready, responsive, and therefore resilient to the increasing threats to extreme weather events. Those threats are related to not only the nature of the events, but the fact that we're becoming more vulnerable to them as we have more people, more infrastructure that could be affected by these events. So we have to ensure that the observations we make for situational awareness, the forecasts we make for people to take the proper responses, are connected to people's actions, the response to these events, so that they will be more resilient to what's facing them. You know, there are examples with respect to hurricanes. More people living along the coastline takes longer to evacuate. We have to make better forecasts with longer lead times, but we also have to communicate the threat so people will actually take action to avoid those storms. Up here you have, as in other parts of the United States, an increasing threat related to fire. As there are more people living in fire-prone areas, we have to ensure that our forecasts are good, that we don't have false alarms that make people not react to the forecast when in fact they should. But we also have to be able to communicate the threat and make sure that we're working with the partners in the emergency management community so that communities and right down to individuals will actually take the proper responses in the face of these events. So that's the strategic goal. There are a lot of challenges for us in terms of improving forecasts, but also improving our communication skills and linking with the emergency management communities that are actually out there trying to protect lives and mitigate property loss.
So a huge partnership effort going forward.
That's one of the important keys for the success of meeting the strategic goal.
Okay. One of the things you're talking about was understanding the weather information we're getting back from the computers, weather modeling, and you did a lot of work with that in some of your prior positions with the Environmental Prediction Center there, the National Center for Environmental Prediction. What can you tell us about recent improvements in that weather modeling? And you were using the polar orbiters as kind of a source of information that started that process.
Well, you know, first of all, we have to recognize that everything you see, you read and hear about weather, climate, or ocean forecasts are all driven by numerical models. Now, it really has been the revolution in our forecast process in the last part of the 20th century. The success of that numerical enterprise is based on three factors: big computers, global data, not just local data, but you have to have a global data set, and then the models themselves, the science that's behind the models and in running the models in an operational mode. So we're working to improve all three of those components. We upgraded our computers last year. We're going through another upgrade even as I speak. We'll be upgrading from 200 trillion calculations per second to 700 trillion calculations per second by January of 2015. This increase in the computer will allow us to run what we call Earth system models. It's not just the atmosphere, it's the atmosphere, ocean, ice, which is obviously very important up here, and land models that are all coupled together at higher resolution. So you need the big computers, you need the science that allows us to run these models and run them in a parallel mode, and that they're coupled so that the ocean effects could affect the atmosphere and vice versa, as an example. And then the global observations are absolutely critical, and over the last 20, 30 years they've become more dependent upon the satellite systems, and especially the polar orbiting satellites, which help drive the observations needed for those models, whether they be atmospheric observations, land, ice observations. We're deriving more and more of that from satellites now that feed into these models and produce forecasts with extended lead times. Now out, for extreme events especially, we're seeing much improved forecast out in the 4, 5, 6, 7, and even 8-day range, which gets us back to Weather Ready Nation, because if you're going to get ready for a storm event, you want those consistent forecasts approaching that event from day 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, so you can take the actions several days in advance that can help mitigate the property loss and protect your livelihood.
Okay, all part of the mission of protecting life and property. Dr. Uccellini, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and speaking to Alaskans and sharing how the National Weather Service is working for Alaska and the nation. Wish you safe travels around the 49th. Enjoy your time here, sir. And for Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and we'll look at the sea ice edge going back to March 19th. And as I advance to today's sea ice edge on the 22nd, you'll be able to see it has advanced to the north and east side of St. Paul Island. We don't expect it to advance much further south, but nevertheless, we've seen that trend. We have low pressure that'll be sitting out there in the west side of the Gulf and weakening a bit before another low works up out of the North Pacific into the west side of the Gulf here for Thursday and on into Friday. Let's look at the marine forecast for the Panhandle on Wednesday. And we do see winds in the inner channels there, 25 to 30 knots, even some gusts to 40 knots at Petersburg. Waves 5-6 feet in the interior channels, Dixon entrance maybe 8-9 feet, and then along the outer coast, look for generally southerly winds 20 to 25 knots, waves 12 to 14 feet. We're going to have a deepening low out in the western Gulf by Thursday afternoon. That's going to create gale force winds on the outer coast there at 35 to 40 knots from the southeast to east, waves anywhere from 17 to as high as 20 feet there as you get offshore and west of Yakutat. Inner channels, look for winds 15 to 25 knots, perhaps gusts to 45 knots from the southeast there at Petersburg, but waves generally 3 to 4 feet, though maybe around 8 feet at Dixon entrance. Across the northwestern Gulf, winds will be out of the south-southeast 20 to 25 knots for the open waters off the Kenai south of Cordova. Easterly 20 knots, 4-foot waves Prince William Sound. Lower portion of Cook Inlet, look for northeast to north winds 25 knots, waves around 8 feet. And then on Thursday, with that low just southwest of the region, we could see winds as high as 50-knot storm force winds south of Cordova there, 45-knot gales off the Kenai. For Prince William Sound, easterly winds to 30 knots, waves 7 feet. And lower Cook Inlet, northeast wind, 35-knot gales, waves anywhere from 10 to 14 feet. Across the southwest, including Kodiak Island, winds ahead. This will be out of the northwest along the Pacific side of the peninsula at about 20 to as high as 30 knots south of Sand Point, and then more northerly 15 to 25 knots from Bristol Bay down to north of Cold Bay, waves 3 to 7 feet. And then on Thursday, we see the low center just to the southeast of Kodiak Island. The counterclockwise circulation will cause some enhanced winds, maybe through Shelikof Strait, 30 knots plus from the northeast. Turning to the north-northwest, northwest 25 to 30 knots on the North Pacific side, and then north to northwest 20 knots from Bristol Bay down toward north of Cold Bay. Across the Aleutian chain, The eastern half will generally be northwest winds around 30 knots, waves 9 to 12 feet on the North Pacific side and 9 or 10 feet on the Bering side. Winds become a little more west to southwest, 25 to 30 knots west of Adak. And then on Thursday, we expect the eastern Aleutians, winds generally from the northwest at 30 knots, waves running around 10 to 12 feet there. Winds will be a little more westerly once you get from around Adak westward through Kiska, 30 knots falling back toward 20 knots, waves 7 to 8 feet. Along the west and southwest coast, over the ice, winds will generally be out of the north around 20-25 knots, and that will cause the ice to maybe push slightly southward. On Thursday, the winds will still have a north-northwesterly component, especially once you get south of St. Lawrence and south of Nunavik Islands, and area of Norton Sound easterly winds at 20 knots with the ice in place. And then along the Arctic coast, winds will generally be out of the east around 25 knots. A little stronger off the northwest coast, Wainwright down through Cape Lisburne, easterly 30-knot winds, and a little lighter coming through the Bering Strait, 15 to 20 knots, turning east then northerly on the north side of St. Lawrence Island. Then along the Arctic coast Thursday, winds are going to increase 30 to 40 knots and continuing down there along the northwest coast to about Point Ley. Easterly offshore flow, Cape Lisburne down to Kivalina, and winds turning more northerly there through the Bering Strait, 15 knots on the north side of St. Lawrence Island. And for Wednesday, weakening low pressure just southwest of Kodiak Island, high pressure stronger, high pressure way to the north up there in the Arctic Ocean. And then by Thursday, a little stronger low there just southeast of Kodiak Island, bringing more precipitation through the Gulf and those gale to even near storm force winds. So thank you for watching the show on this Tuesday evening, and be sure to join me again tomorrow night.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.